All my life, I had this dream of having a good career. I ended up having several careers as a professor and working for a think tank and so on, and then retiring at 60 and have my house paid for and maybe get a boat and live the good life. And I had kind of, without realizing it, bought into the Del Webb Sun City notion that started in 1960 of retirement as a period of the golden years, a period of endless leisure and amusement. And I was looking forward to that. And so I retired, and 4 months after I retired, I was bored to tears. I mean, I had, you can only go boating so many days and play so much golf, and pretty soon you're saying, is that all there is? And like the song. And so I started, every time the phone rang, I would say, yes, I'll do that. Oh, I'll be happy to do that. And pretty soon I had 40 hours a week doing things, 3/4 of which I didn't want to do. So I started thinking a lot about what is retirement all about. And then a guy who I'd worked with for many years, was named CEO of the largest telecommunications company in Australia, and he called me up one day and said, would you like to go back there with me for a year or so, and we're going to privatize the largest telecommunications company in Australia. I said, yeah, I'd love to, and I ended up going for 4 years. And when I came back, I came back in 2009. We were there for 4 years, 2005 to 2009, and I was just dismayed by what I saw in the retirement literature. The retirement literature was either about all the pains and suffering and all the pathologies of elder life, or they were about the days of endless leisure and amusement, or they were about financial planning. And if you've retired, the financial planning horse is out of the barn, so it's not much use. And I started thinking, is that really what later life is about? And that's when it hit me that we are in the midst of a revolution. We're really the first generation. I'm the first generation. You're the first generation of people who have experienced longevity. Longevity was the second most important achievement of the 20th century, according to Science magazine. Number one was electrification of the country. Number two was longevity. Our life expectancy went from 47 years in 1940 to 78 years by the end of the century. And when Roosevelt passed and the Congress passed Social Security in 1935, they set the retirement age at 65. Well, the actual life expectancy at that time was 61. That's why a guy like Roosevelt got reelected 4 times. I mean, he knew, how to play the game. And but we didn't index Social Security retirement age of 65 to longevity the way we index Social Security payments to the cost of living. If we indexed Social Security retirement age of 65 to longevity, the retirement age today would be 82. And we wouldn't have a problem with, financing Social Security either. People are just living longer. If you live to be 65 years old, everybody thinks about retirement or life expectancy in terms of, when you're born, you have a life expectancy of, say, 78. Well, if you reach 65, you have a life expectancy of 85. 75% of the people who reach 65 will reach 85, and 40% of the people who reach 65 will reach 90, and 20% of the people who reach 65 will reach 95. And of course, once you reach 85, the chances of reaching 90 go up by about 40%. So I mean, we're all living longer, and in fact, most of us will have more years in quote retirement than we had in working years. And the question is, what do you do with those years? We better think as seriously about the last 30 years of our life as we thought about the first 30 years of our life. But there are some big differences. Number one, in the ages from 20 to 45, that's 40 years, all kinds of things happen. Just think about it. I mean, nobody would say, well, what happened? How did you have your adult years? Say, what do you mean my adult years? I mean, in my 20s I did one thing, my 30s I did another thing, the 40s I did another thing. And so there are many changes between 25 and 45. But most of the changes that happen, you have control over. You decide that you go to college, you decide to get married, you decide to buy a house, you decide to have kids. Usually, you decide to, you decide. Think of all the decides I'm using, and most of the things that you decide are good things. I mean, get married, have a baby, buy a house, buy a car. Every once in a while, there's a bad thing. You get a divorce, maybe, or you get a disease, early onset disease, or something. Some bad things do happen, but most of the things that happen are good things, and they're things that you decide to do. But between 65 and 85, 20 years, I think there are as many changes in your life between 65 and 85 as there are between 20 and 65. But there are some big differences. The changes between between 65 and 85, those changes are largely not under your control. You go to the doctor one day happy, and you come out and you find you've got a problem that you didn't know you had, and it's a serious problem. Or, there's a recession and your retirement stash has been cut in half. Or the car, which you didn't plan on having to replace during your retirement years, all of a sudden conks out and you have to replace. So there are lots of things that happen in those 20 years that are negative, not positive, and most of them are not under your control. This idea that retirement's kind of a slice of time that's kind of one piece. It's more like an Oriental rug. There are all kinds of different shapes and distances, and it's like what I call a kaleidoscope. And you turn that kaleidoscope just a little bit, and everything changes. I mean, I've got a problem with my ankle that I didn't have 6 months ago. And one of my bucket list items has always been to be in Rolling Thunder. The motorcycle, they had, I think, 500,000 motorcycles. So I rented a motorcycle this weekend, and my son has a Harley. It's kind of a hobby Harley, like most people who have Harleys. They don't really use them for anything except fun. And when I got there, instead of giving me a mid-sized Harley, which is what I'd ordered, the only thing they had left was a big cruiser. I said, that's okay, I'll take it. Well, it weighed 800 pounds. I've had 2 shoulder replacements in the last 18 months. I've got an ankle problem now. I couldn't handle it. That was a downer. That was a bad downer. But I don't get depressed about it because I stopped to think, I'm like Kermit the Frog. Kermit the Frog said, I'm green. I hate being green. Everything is green. People almost step on me because they can't see me because I'm green. Why couldn't I be yellow or red or blue or one of those really pretty colors? And then he stops halfway through his song and he says, but I like being green. God made me green. And almost everything else that God made was green. And I'll bet people see me and they say, I wish I could be green like him. In fact, I'm just green and I'm happy that I'm green. Well, that's the way I said to myself yesterday. I said, I don't need to ride in that Rolling Thunder. I'm happy that I'm what I wish I were a little stronger up here like I used to be just 2 years ago. I wish my ankle wasn't weak so I couldn't hold an 800-pound motorcycle up, but it isn't. And that's what part of that 20 years between 60 and 85 is all about. There will be what I call a ceremony of losses, to be sure, in those 20 or 30 years that you have after 65 years old. But there's no reason why that ceremony of losses should change who you are. It may change what you can do, it may change what you can have, but it shouldn't change who you are. And in fact, your character and who you are should grow and become richer because of these limitations that inevitably happen. That's what aging is about. The prescription then, for me, is to keep working in some fashion. I mean, I think that it's better to wear out than rust out. That's my motto. And now one of the things I'm learning as I grow older is, you also do wear out. I mean, things go wrong, but you learn to live with that. But I think that if you look at it from a spiritual point of view, from let's say a Judeo-Christian point of view, God made work for man to do. Man's not made for work. That's a slave. But work was made for man. there's the garden out there. And we have all kinds of things that we can do to use our gifts to help others or to repair the world. So from a spiritual or scriptural Judeo-Christian point of view, I would say we're called to work. We're called to use our gifts. There's no place in the ancient scriptures where it says you should retire your gifts at 85 and lie down and watch the flowers grow. No, we're supposed to use our gifts to the very end. If you look at it from a secular point of view, I would say that, the world needs people like us. They need people who are tried and true. They need people who have gifts and talents. They need people who can do things for others, to help them, to love them, and to repair the world. The world is always in need of repair. And so I think that what we need to do is stay engaged. The best predictor of successful aging is social engagement. The people who remain socially engaged are the people who live the longest, live the healthiest, and live the most fulfilling lives. And there's all kinds of evidence on that, and books have been written about it. Well, how do you stay engaged? That's kind of an abstract thing. Well, I say the best way to stay engaged is to work. Because in work, you have to work with other people. To work, you're helping other people. To work, you get feedback from other people. Work is a place where you're accountable to somebody else. There's nothing like accountability to lead to rich social engagement. We're all searching for meaning. And when you're in 18 to 22, you're doing that in the context of guidance called lectures and books. And so it's structured. But when you reach 65, you realize, most of us realize, not all of us, most of us realize we've drifted through, not drifted through, but sped through the previous 30 years and forgot about what does this all mean. All of a sudden, what does my life mean? Yeah. And then I think that's again where work becomes a very good solution, because you realize I know a lot about something. I know a lot about how to deal with people. I have skills that I didn't have. How can I put those to work? Because my skills and my temperament are needed in order to help others or repair the world. And that's where meaning comes from. And Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. And in that book, he says, that Freud said we are driven by sexual issues in our life that go back to our childhood. And then Adler came along and said, no, we're driven by a desire for power. And then Frankl comes along and says, no, we're driven by a desire for meaning. And I'm a Frankl guy. I think that's what drives most of us. And I've interviewed more than 1,000 people now in their later life, and I can testify from that most people, when you scrape away the crust, they are searching for meaning. Sinclair Lewis says in chapter 33 of East of Eden, he kind of pauses and has a chapter where he just reflects on the story that he's telling. And he says, every man lives with the frightening thought that his passing will go unnoticed. And then he also says, the most important thing in life is who did you love and who loved you. And I think, based on my own personal experience, and my people I've known in my family who've gone to the other side now, and the 1,000 people that I've interviewed, I would say that describes almost everybody, those questions.